Welcome back to Creepcast. Today we are doing a listener submission. I've been seeing this pop up a lot. It's called Tommy Taffy. And here's the funny thing about that. We've never read this one before. I've never heard of it. I had to go through about 3 18 and up prompts to even see text for this story. So I just want to say, that's your warning, I guess. I don't know what I'm supposed to say.
I told you I've never heard this story before. I could be lying. And the number of 18 plus warnings would indicate something I would lie about. So keep that in mind as we get into it. Also, hi, everyone.
All I see here is it's just on r/nosleep. It just says his name was Tommy Taffy. I don't even want to do any little preamble. I just kind of want to dive in.
I have no idea what it says. At the beginning, there's a link to another story that when I click on it also gives me an 18 up warning.
Good.
It says some of you may read my son's account. So maybe the son's account is like the same story from their perspective or something. I don't know. I also will say that the audience has been batting 0 for 0 so far.
That's true.
They've all sucked. So we'll see if you all keep up that. I also want to mention that in the last episode, upon watching the upload, a lot of my impeccable Jeff Goldblum impression was cut from the final level. And I equate that to the burning of the Library of Alexandria. I think that is perfect art that should not be tampered with. So this is your warning. I am going to insert it into any location I can through this story and make it impossible for the editor to catch all of them. Okay? Because I'm mad and will continue to be mad.
Yeah, people will talk of the deletion of the Jeff Goldblum impression, much like Greeks wearing robes talked about the burning of Alexandria. It'll have that infamy.
I think there were literally like 20 minutes of me sitting here talking in a Jeff Goldblum voice that never made it. Yes. Just me going, could be a dead child.
Could be a dead child. Yes.
I mean, my son, Benjamin.
Well, I say, without further ado, let's hop into his name was Tommy Taffy.
Tommy Taffy. I'm just glad that you can't do that Cleverbot voice this time. I wanted to punch the monitor. I was getting so mad.
Cleverbot was the low point for sure.
That whole story just became you and I like reading lines and then you like making me upset with your line reading. I felt violent there for a while.
It was pulling teeth. It was pulling teeth is what it was. And here's the thing. A lot of people, like I said, have suggested this story. It's been probably out of the last couple, I'd say the last couple weeks, I've seen it more so than others. We have a list of stuff like stolen tongues, and my wife is peeking around me from corners, but I do think Tommy Taffy has been more requested so far. Okay. And I just want to say that people's nostalgia do a crazy, crazy thing with, stories they like. So don't take these bad stories personally. It's just it is what it is. Also, these are all random internet users. A lot of them are not professional writers or anything, and we understand that. We're just here to have fun. And I just wanted to say once again before we get into this, I had to click through 4 active firewalls, verify my age 7 different times. I don't know what the hell happens in the story, but I feel like something bad's gonna happen. So that's your warning as well. I know people want us to put some kind of warnings up as well. That's the only warning I can give. Other than that, I have no idea.
Yeah, this is gonna hurt somewhere. But our audience either recommended it because it's bad and they know it'll be bad, or it has some kind of sexual exploitation, which they can't get enough of apparently. So
all I know is my faith in our audience is beginning to dwindle.
Yeah, beginning to.
It is. Yeah, it's completely depleted.
Yeah, that's more like
they're on a razor's edge with me right now. All right, it is that thin. Okay, let's dive in.
Let's get into it. So, and also before we get into it, everyone who is liking us and watching us on audio platforms, please continue to do so. It helps, I think. So we have a bunch of people who show up now in the comments who are like, who are you people? Why is this in my recommended? So I think that's what's causing it. So keep it up. Appreciate it.
If you're driving to work, feel free to throw this up on Spotify, Apple Podcast, all that kind of stuff. It really does go a long way. And also wanted to throw this in before we get too deep into all this, and before I forget, within the next coming weeks, we should have our first merch drop. So be on the lookout for that. I'm hoping within the next episode or so.
Yeah, if you all enjoyed the hat I was wearing last time and forgot to mention that I was wearing the hat, that was promo, so I just had it on and never said anything about it. That hat might potentially be part of it, so stay tuned for that.
Yes.
All right, let's get into it. His name
Let's do it.
was Tommy Taffy.
Tommy Taffy.
Okay, so after beginning to read his name was Tommy Taffy, it turns out that is a prequel, which you all did not tell us about and is entirely your fault. So we're going to read the original story, and if it's not stupid, we will then read his name was Tommy Taffy. You guys would give us a sequel first to be like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Watch it. So now, forget that his name was Tommy Taffy. In a sudden change on the field, we're moving into the third parent.
The third parent, aka it's also known as the Smiling Man, is what I'm seeing here as well. Oh, apparently they made a movie about this too. IMDb 2024. It just came out this year.
What did you guys recommend us do? Okay, we're gonna read the third parent.
Well, fuck it. I don't even know anymore. Third parent. Let's
Third
go.
parent.
Let's go.
Okay, here we go. Third parent. This is your. It's already off to a traumatic start, and it's the audience's fault this time. I can't be blamed for it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. My name is Matt, and my childhood wasn't normal. Not by any stretch of the word. Something happened to my family that is almost impossible to understand. But I'm going to try my best to explain those 5 years. 5 years of my life I spent in terror. 5 years we all lived in fear. 5 years we'll never get back. My father, Spence, wasn't a very strong man, both physically and mentally. He was the type of dad who often let our mothers speak for both of them. Now, he wasn't a complete pushover, but he often was content to just go with the flow rather than alter it. He worked hard and dedicated his free time to us, his family. He made sure our needs were taken care of, his soft assurances, the unseen foundation of our family. My mother, Megan, was the head of our house. She was outspoken, independent, and extremely loyal to all of us. She loved my father's quiet ways, and even from a young age, I could see the chemistry flowing strong between them. My little sister, Stephanie, was a year younger than I. She looked up to me, and my father always told me it was my responsibility to look after her. We got along as best we could, and even though I gave her all kinds of brotherly hardship, I did love her. We lived in a suburban middle-class community, a complete stock photo of the American dream. My father worked a respectable 9-to-5 job while my mother taught yoga classes out of the house. It was a neat life, organized and structured. Everything was discussed, considered, and acted upon as a family. It was a good home to grow up in. But that was before he showed up. That was before the third parent.
Ooh, kind of like that little intro, huh?
Yeah, that feels good. I like it.
What if this whole story is just the parents just are in a cuck relationship?
I do. All the 18 up warnings are kind of scaring me.
I'm wondering. I don't know.
I'm a little afraid.
There's a lot of different elements here, right? There's a lot of red flags. Let me just say that. One, my little sister Stephanie was a year younger than I. You're setting up all these different characters. You never know, right? You even have the mom. Well, there's also a thing too. Did you ever have a friend whose parents ran any kind of business out of their house?
Yeah, my parents did that. My dad.
I had a buddy whose mom did hairdressing out of her basement. It was like a nice studio area. And there was like a staircase that went down from the outside of the house down to their basement. So you didn't have to actually go through their home, is what I mean.
Yeah.
But what was crazy was one of the sons of that person's mom broke into their house one night and like actually rummaged through the house while everyone was sleeping.
Oh.
And I'm wondering, it's just that like, the narrator saying, oh, my mom ran a yoga class. I was like, oh shit. Like it made me immediately go to that. I see
what you're saying. Yeah.
So I don't know. That sent a little shiver up my spine. And also just the line too, that was before the third parent is just that line goes pretty hard.
The third parent's an ominous enough like title, that it kind of gives you a direction of like, a kid, adult doesn't really understand it. But yeah, it's kind of like the, the thing, the unknown kind of concept. That's a good intro. I dig it. It is a little, it's a little, methodical in being like, well, this is my dad, this is my mom, this is my sister. But I think that's fine,
The biggest thing is I just want to say I'm a little nervous is all I got to say. I'm a little nervous. The amount of times I had to verify my age to read this story.
Oh, I'm scared.
Has made me nervous. All right. I am nervous.
I am afraid.
Ooh, okay. So this is an older one. It's July 1989 is the next text heading.
July 1989. I was sitting at the dinner table, waiting for my father to finish cooking. It was his turn tonight, and my stomach roared for his rosemary chicken. My sister, Stephanie, lay on her stomach in the living room coloring. Her golden blonde hair fell across her shoulders in waves, and she looked up at me, smiling. She extended what she had been working on, and I nodded, completely unimpressed.
She was a terrible
artist.
Yeah,
that's such a brother thing, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Stephanie was always terrible at drawing bears, but she always insisted on doing so.
She sniffed at me and continued her sketch.
What?
Like, kids like...
Oh, like a scoff.
Okay.
Like
that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't know if she was like smelling them. I was like, what the fuck is going on with this family, dude?
Everything's normal so far. Yeah, so far. My mother walked in the kitchen, pulling her hair back from her freshly showered face.
Everyone gone?
My father asked from the stove. My mother nodded.
Yes, Spence. The house is ours again. It's so much better teaching yoga in the basement. So much cooler. I'm glad we finished the basement over the winter. My clients are relieved as well. It's a scorcher out there today. Dude, it's another basement thing. What did I say? Creepy. Don't like that. Mom, can you sit down so we can eat?
I begged for my spot at the table. My mother turned to me and laughed.
Matt, the hungriest 6-year-old this side of the Mississippi. Why don't you ask your dad to hurry up? He's the one cooking.
I will say, I'm not saying this is a hater. I've not activated hater mode. I like it so far, but the dialogue is kind of funny. Of like, wow, I sure am glad we installed that basement. Sure is hot outside. Oh, my little 6-year-old son. Why don't you ask that,
Oh, my 6-year-old boy, the hungriest little boy this side of the Mississippi. Why don't you frolic over to your father? Well, he's the one who's cooking the pork chops.
Yeah. It's like how an alien thinks that like normal like family interactions go,
Yeah.
No hate. It's all well and good. This is perfectly fine. But that just made me laugh. Hungry as 6-year-old. I placed my forehead on the table's lip.
Dad, I'm going to die.
Stephanie looked up from her coloring book.
Matt, don't be crazy.
You're crazy.
I muttered, not looking up.
Nuh-uh.
She said, sticking her tongue out at me.
All right.
My father said, turning from the stove. In his hands, he held a steaming platter of chicken.
Come sit down, Steph. The food's ready.
I ordered my sister. The sight of the seasoned meat causing me to salivate. I thought that was the dad's line for a second. So
I did too.
Yeah, so
yeah,
the
sorry.
idea of the
Right,
boy.
let me reread that.
No, you have to leave it. The boy being like, "Come sit down, Steph."
A 6-year-old boy, yeah. Come sit down, Steph. The food's ready.
The chicken activated puberty.
I just gained another ball.
That's the 4th one this week.
That's testicular torsion if I've ever seen it.
As she pulled herself from the floor, my mother taking a place beside me, we all froze as someone knocked on the front door. My mother and father exchanged puzzled looks. My dad placed the food down on the table and told us all to hold on a minute. Groaning, I watched him walk to the front door. He peeked through the keyhole, and I saw him visibly tense. His whole body cementing like a statue.
He peeked through the keyhole of the door?
Oh, I didn't even catch that. That is kind of...
I wonder if they just mean like the little hole in the middle of the door. But the keyhole makes it seem like it's where
literally
the
keyhole,
key.
yeah. Like it's the 1600s, yeah.
Spence, who is it?
My mother asked. My father slowly turned back around to us, all blood draining from his face. His eyes were wide and I saw fear dilate his pupils. He licked his lips and shot Stephanie and I a look.
Spence?
My mom pressed, her face contorting with concern.
No, this can't happen. Not again.
I heard him whisper, staring off into the middle distance. The door shook as another series of knocks echoed through the house. My mom stood, her voice cracking with contagious fear.
Spence, who is it? What's going on?
I'm so sorry.
My father mumbled, clutching his stomach, his face a pale sheet.
I have to let him in.
Before any of us could say anything else, my dad turned and opened the door. Dying sunlight blinded me, and I squinted to see who our unannounced visitor was.
Hi, I'm Tommy Taffy. It's good to see you again, Spence.
I watched as my father slowly backed away from the open door. A man entered our house and shut the door behind him. My young mind tried to make sense of what I was seeing, but even at that young age, I knew something wasn't right with this unexpected guest. He was about 6 feet and had a shock of golden hair cut tight along his scalp. He wore khaki shorts and a white t-shirt that said,
Hi!
in red cartoon font.
I'm picturing like a youth pastor or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
like a guy
yeah.
who looks like he's like a guy wearing khakis. I imagine they didn't say this, but khakis. I imagine Birkenstocks with tube socks on, and he has blonde hair pulled back super tight, probably into a ponytail. I also pictured him wearing like the it's like the glasses that also turn into sunglasses when you go outside.
Mm-hmm.
That.
That wasn't what caught my eye. It was his skin. It was completely devoid of pores. A perfectly smooth, creamy texture that looked almost like soft plastic. His face was a pool of gentle pink, his mouth a cheerful cut along his cheeks, revealing a white strip of teeth. But they weren't teeth. It was just a smooth, edgeless row. Like he had a mouth guard on. His nose was just a slight rise out of his face, like a doll, void of nostrils. And his eyes were twin puddles of sparkling blue, shining out at us from his flawless, eerie face. They were wide, like he was in a constant state of surprise, and they shifted around the room to look at us in quick, jarring motion.
Interesting. How do you feel about that description?
So, devoid of pores, like it's uncharacteristically smooth, right?
I'm almost thinking like an action figure. For like a vinyl
That
figure
is
or
what
something
kind of
like that.
I think, because the way he said that he had like a slicked back golden hair reminds me of like the way action figures are just are like painted blonde on the top of their head.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like he's like a mannequin almost.
Yeah, almost like a dummy or like some kind of like ventriloquist puppet or something. It's like just kind of weird.
You know those like videos you'll see of like, I think he made a video about it, but like those extreme plastic surgery cases.
Yeah.
Of people who like remove any semblance of like humanity or like lived experience from their body. It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah. Something very uncanny, unnatural, especially it's like you're able to see it almost immediately. The deal too about, it kind of makes you think of, I can't remember if it's Robin Williams. It was this movie called Bicentennial Man, but Robin Williams plays like a robot. And in that movie, the robot version of Robin Williams is very smooth. It just looks like a weird toy. It's odd. It's making me think of that.
Yeah, I see. It does kind of remind me of that.
Also, how weird is that he's like, not again. We have to let him in, which obviously we're getting ready to dive into as well. But that would freak me out. If my dad said that and then a Funko Pop man walked in, that would fuck me up.
Yeah, if your dad's like, I'm so sorry, but I have to
and
let
then
him
a giant
in. Yeah.
Funko box comes to the door.
Yeah, no thanks.
Daddy, I thought you said you were done collecting Funko Pops. I was. I thought I was.
His smile widened, and he raised a flawless hand to us at the table.
Hi, I'm Tommy Taffy. It's good to meet you.
I noticed he didn't have any fingernails or skin defects. No wrinkles or bruises. Nothing. It was like he was a living, talking, human-sized doll. Okay, well, we beat the story to that punch. We were smarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a living, talking, human-sized Funko Pop.
His head was insanely large, larger than his
head
torso.
was very large. His eyes were as black as space.
Man, how scary would that be? Like a human whose
That would be
head's like
fucking
you? That'd
horrifying.
be pretty freaky, wouldn't it? Yeah.
That would be horrifying.
Like him coming down the hallway screaming at you.
Yeah, he's like breaking the walls because his heads keep hitting each side of the hallway.
Mom!
Yeah, that kind of thing.
Wait! Today's episode is sponsored by Aura.
You know, on this podcast, we cover a lot of things that are spooky, scary, I would even say. But there's really nothing more horrifying than getting your personal information stolen. Oh my God! Lurking in the dark corners of the internet, there are people trying to access your name, your email, your home address, your health records, and even the names of your family and friends. My God. It might start off like a simple interaction, like, you know, somebody at a gas station trying to talk to you like you're from out of town. But data brokers are looking to sell your information to scammers all the time. And that's why you need Aura! Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and kicks them to the curb. Aura also protects me from hackers trying to get into social media and bank accounts. Recently, AT&T revealed that over 73 million customer records were released on the dark web. And they said that the best way to prevent this from happening is with strong passwords, account monitoring, and setting up fraud alerts. Luckily, Aura does this all for me in one simple app with a low cost. The best part is when anything like this happens, I know my information is safe and secure and always protected. Fear no breach with Aura, and go to aura.com/creepcast or check the description to start your free 2-week trial today. Thank you, Aura, for sponsoring this episode, and back to the episode. Spence?
My mother croaked. Recognition blooming in her eyes.
It's going to be okay, Megan. Let's just be polite to our new guest, okay?
The man, Tommy, cocked his head towards my father. My dad took a step back, raising his hands.
I mean our new friend.
The frozen smile never left Tommy's molded face. There was no humor in his strange laugh. It sounded like he was clearing his throat or imitating a really bad chuckle. It was too pronounced, each syllable sounding too deliberate. My father forced a smile onto his face.
I meant...
He looked desperately at my mother, who offered him no help, her body frozen in absolute fear.
I meant meet your new parent, kids.
Man, this is...
What the fuck?
This is freaky. Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
This is kind of fucking me up, actually. Also, I'd say, Dad, you're a coward.
Imagine being a
You're
6-year-old at that age, right?
Yeah, a 6-year-old. Well, hold on, Isaiah. Not only a 6-year-old, but the hungriest 6-year-old this side of the Mississippi.
That's true.
And you're like, oh, now I have a new daddy who's hopefully cooks me better fucking chicken than this goon.
Man, it'd be funny if like it goes to the kid to speak and he's like, I just finished my chicken. Like he's just eating this whole time.
Yeah. But I finished my plate and I was already putting it in the sink.
Now I can recognize how awful
He's
the
like,
situation was.
Now I'm just imagining the main character. He's just like this morbidly obese child.
I'm hungry.
Stephanie, who was standing by her mother, frowned.
He's not our dad. You are. And why does he look so funny? Stephanie!
My mother hissed, gripping my sister's shoulder. Tommy laughed and walked forward to crouch in front of Stephanie.
It's not nice to make fun of people who look different, is it?
My sister looked at her feet, blushing. Tommy tasseled her hair.
It's okay. Wake up, kiddo. We're going to get along just fine. I'm going to help your parents raise you. It's a big job being a mommy and a daddy. Sometimes mommy and daddies need help.
I immediately don't like this. I'm immediately scared.
I'm going to let you know right now. I'm actually unsettled.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the giant red flags before we started reading it of being like, turn back.
You don't understand.
Back.
Literally like 5 times it was like, are you 18? Not safe for work. Are you an adult? Please find something else to read.
You know what's fucked up is even when I was like thinking about how we're joking about this, I still pictured the main kid just like, he's like grabbing his mom's plate now and he's eating that chicken too.
Like he's over there like the Tasmanian devil, like
Yeah, there's just like a tiny tornado going around the kitchen.
Tommy turned to my parents, that ever-present plastic smile stretching his face.
I helped their mommy and daddies raise them. Isn't that right, Spence? Megan.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh.
God. Immediately, like obviously it's uncanny with his visuals, right? I know. It's uncanny with his visuals, but now you're like, oh, Tommy's like,
can we go to read
I'm
Jeff the Killer?
685 years old.
Can we read Jeff the Killer or something? I'm scared.
Yeah, no shit. This is gonna get bad. What a great line though. I helped their mommy and daddies raise them. That's crazy.
Megan pulled Stephanie away as my father nodded nervously.
That's right, kids. He did.
Tommy smiled and turned to me. I was still sitting at the table, taking the odd scene in. I didn't understand what was happening. Didn't know who this weird-looking man was or what he wanted. What he was saying didn't make sense, but my parents seemed to know him, so I kept my speculations to myself. Oh, that's terrible. The kid's like, well, mom and dad trust him, so, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, how fucking real is that, though, for a kid?
Yeah, I don't, gosh.
And you must be mad.
Tommy said, walking over to me. I didn't look at him, training my eyes to stare at my empty plate. I suddenly wasn't hungry anymore. I could feel the strange man beside me, his presence filling my head. I looked at my lips and felt my heart begin to race. I didn't like this intruder. Something about him felt dangerous. Tommy walked behind me, chuckling, his hands sliding over my slender shoulders.
No, it looks like we have a shy one.
Gosh.
That's okay. I'll help him with that.
Connor, I don't like it.
I don't like it either.
He said to my parents. His fingers dug into my skin and I winced, but kept my mouth shut.
Don't touch him.
My mother hissed, eyes going wide. Tommy looked up at her, mouth stretched. My dad outstretched his hand, alarmed.
Don't be so rude, Megan.
Tommy continued to stare at my mother, who nervously lowered her eyes.
Are you staying for dinner?
Stephanie suddenly asked, breaking the tense silence. The eerie doll man let go of my shoulders, one of his hands sliding across my cheek and into my hair.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Oh, yes. I'll be here for quite a while.
Did you all tell us to
one
just
of his
flat
hands sliding
out,
across my cheek and into my hair? My God,
is this flat
dude.
out about just like
I
a
think.
child predator?
I think.
Why would you all give us this if that's what this
I
is
don't
going
know.
to?
God damn it.
We were doing good. We went like 5 episodes with no child predators. It was doing good.
They're all sons of bitches.
1999. Okay, we did 3. We did 3 without it happening. That was pretty
Basically
good for
2
us.
months.
Basically 2
2
months.
months.
Yeah, we were doing great because it was Pen Pal, and then we had 3, and then it was 1999, and now we have 3, and now it's back.
I don't like that. I don't like this. Here's the thing, Isaiah. With that last sentence of one of his hands sliding across my cheek into my hair.
Yeah.
That's disgusting. The implication.
That physically hurts.
But I'm just going to pray that maybe, and I know this is fucked up to say, but maybe he just like breaks the kid's legs or something and call it a day.
I'm gonna pray he just breaks the kid's legs.
Just smash the kid's fingers and be done with it. Let's have it be one of those stories, please.
That is an all-time Creepcast quote. That's really good.
Also, I just want to say too, before we keep going, I just want to say once again, you all have been warned. You cannot be mad at us with whatever's happened. Okay, whatever happens from here on out, we don't know. But I would just assume abandon all hope, ye who enter here, is what I would say.
Okay. And that was how Tommy Taffy entered our lives. At 6 years old, I didn't know any better than to seriously question what was happening. Even though my parents acted unsettled at his arrival, their constant assurances that he was a friend pushed away any lingering doubt I had. As the days turned into weeks, I began to grow accustomed to Tommy's presence in our house. My initial fear slowly receded to weary caution. I soon learned that Tommy didn't like company. Whenever my mother had her yoga classes, Tommy would pull her off into a corner and whisper something to her. I would watch all this with silent eyes. I would see my mother's face grow pale and she would nod, whispering back unknown assurances. Then Tommy would turn, that ever-present smile plastered on his face, and walk upstairs until the class was over. My parents told Stephanie and I that we weren't to talk about Tommy to our friends. Outside of the house, Tommy wasn't a part of our lives. I don't know why, but both my sister and I obeyed.
I mean, not to keep stopping, but do you think this is like reading as the way that people, I guess, hold traumatic experiences, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's it. That's immediately what I thought of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems just one of those things where it's like, don't tell anybody. It's none of your business. And then now it's just one of those things that becomes normalized.
Don't mention it outside of the house now. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a disgusting thing like that.
It immediately makes me sad, and I hate everyone who suggested such things. So
we're not even into the actual story really yet, besides the intro, and I'm like disgusted. My stomach is turned.
I'm pretty upset already. So thanks everyone. I appreciate this. I should know better than to listen to you people.
I'm not going to anymore. I'm not going to anymore.
We could be reading Psychosis
I feel
right
so
now.
naive.
We could be reading Psychosis or Slender Man or something goofy, but no, here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are. Okay. Another thing I noticed was that Tommy never ate. He would sit at the table with us, but he never partook in the meal. Stephanie asked him once if he was ever hungry, and Tommy just smiled at her silently and stroked her head. Oh, gosh.
Oh, damn, dude. God.
Oh, that image of a smiling plastic man being asked a question and just staring at her like these giant eyes and just reaching over to touch her. Like,
yeah.
I will say that as far as like a horror piece, incredibly effective so far. Like from
like
writing,
the idea of like a doll man.
Great. Yeah.
Like an immortal doll man. And then also the weird thing, would it be systematic or I guess generational trauma?
It'd be generational. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The generational trauma is fucking crazy from this weird candle man.
Okay. During the evenings, he would gather our family into the living room and give us a short lesson on how to be a good person. My parents never spoke during these talks, just sat next to us, nodding. Tommy told us not to make fun of others, to love our friends and enemies, and always help those in need. He told us that's why he was here with us, to help my parents raise us. That we could come talk to him if we had a problem at school or didn't know how to handle certain situations. It went on like this for a month, and that's when my mother lost it. I feel ill. This is...
I just want to say it's very unsettling. Like it's very effective.
Oh,
like,
it's great. It's great from a horror perspective. Yeah, they're killing it for sure. But that being said, I don't like that they're killing it right now.
Yeah, no shit.
Because it makes me upset.
Because I am uncomfy.
Because I was having a good day and I'm not all of a sudden all at once. And I think the reason for that is this little story. Okay. August 1989. My father had just arrived home from work and I was sitting at the kitchen table doing my homework. My mother was cooking dinner and Stephanie was practicing her dance for an upcoming school play. She was going to be a ballerina and had 3 weeks to learn a few simple spins and twirls. She had been diligently practicing over the past few days, but just couldn't get it right. She was young and her temper was getting the better of her. That's when Tommy decided to help her. He had been sitting on the couch watching her when suddenly he rose and stood behind my sister, on her, placing his hands gently over her shoulders.
Oh god, dude! I
so
I have to be the fucking guy's voice.
Yeah, I'm glad.
Let me help, sweetie.
Yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad you have to be that voice. Good.
Let me help, sweetie.
He cooed, his voice carrying a cheerful note. My mother spun around from the stove and I saw her visibly tense. She didn't like Tommy touching us. I know where it's going.
It is.
I know where it has
irony.
to be going. The 18 content warnings tell me where this is going.
What I wouldn't give to just have him be like more of like a Looney Tunes character and just has like a cast iron skillet and he just like beats the shit out of the children with the cast iron skillet. That would be so much more digestible.
I would be thrilled if he dropped an anvil on one of the kids.
Oh God, absolutely.
That would hit like a drug at the moment. It would be awesome. But no, we don't get that.
No. Oh, absolutely not.
She gripped the wooden spoon in her hand until her knuckles went white, watching as Tommy crouched and cupped Stephanie's body with his. He took her hands in his from behind and guided her arms and waist, his cheek pressing gently against my sister's.
Fuck, Mom, beat his ass.
I imagine though that like Tommy's like some monster, right? You can't kill him.
I'm assuming that he is wearing a costume or something.
Oh.
I'm assuming that there is something inside. I don't necessarily believe that he is actually just a doll. I think it is some kind of entity that is dressed up as a man. hinting that also I'm thinking that as a predator standpoint from the story that I think it's trying to do is that monsters wear masks or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Predators wear masks and stuff, which is why I think it's supposed to be uncanny like that reason. But I do think like, I don't know if it's going to be paranormal. I don't know if it's going to be I don't know what avenue they're going, but I do think it is like something that is not human. Tommy, let her learn on her own.
Mom said, her voice shaking. Tommy didn't even look at her, just kept guiding my sister. I could hear my father coming down the stairs, freshly changed from a day at the office. Tommy spun my sister, and for the first time, she knelt to twirl, her little feet twisting her body in a complete circle. Tommy clapped his hands once and then leaned down and kissed Stephanie on the cheek.
Good girl.
Don't do that.
My mother shrieked, dropping the spoon, her face draining of blood. I jumped in my seat at the table and swallowed hard. I didn't know why my mom was getting so upset. He was just helping her.
Oh, you naive little son of a bitch.
Well, he's 6. Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
point.
that's
They
exactly- that's
don't,
why I'm
they
like,
don't
ugh.
understand what's
Yeah.
happening.
Well, especially him, 6 years old. He's
What
like,
is
"Oh,
with
why?"
us reading stories that are representational of like childhood abuse? Why does that keep happening?
There's a lot of horrifying things, whatever, but I just think, is there anything more horrifying than this? It's hard to pinpoint.
I
this
think
shit.
I would transfer my paycheck to the author if all of a sudden Kyle from Baraska just walked in the door. I was like, yo, this chicken sucks.
Yo, Mr. T, is it my turn to dance with you yet?
You've got sandwiches.
Puts on I Kissed a Girl and I Liked It by Katy Perry. He's like, damn, that chicken smells sweet.
In my mind, Kyle's there right now making this better. He's
becoming my guardian angel.
He's my comfort character. Yeah.
He's the big safety blanket. Yeah.
I also knew deep down that it was a bad idea to yell at the new member of our family. It was the gut instinct of a child, a gentle warning that rumbled in my head. Tommy stood.
One thing I do like about this story, though, is that he never lashes back out. He just laughs.
Yeah.
And that's how you know that he's like, that's the wrong answer.
Yep. Uh-oh, bad decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's like
which
just like a
is
little uncanny
so
warning.
menacing. So menacing.
It's literally like it's like a rattlesnake rattling their tail.
Yes,
It reminds me of that.
Oh, man. My father was standing at the foot of the stairs now, frozen, unsure what to make of the confrontation.
Megan, what's wrong?
He asked. My mother's eyes never left Tommy.
Spence, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep pretending everything is all right. We know what the monster is. We know what he did to our town all those years ago. I want him out of our house.
My father's eyes went wide, panic blooming in his face.
Megan,
He licked his lips, eyes darting back and forth at all of us.
don't be rude. Tommy has been a big help.
My mom grit her teeth.
Stop that. Stop pretending we want him here. I can't watch this happen. I want him out.
Very slowly, Tommy walked into the kitchen and stood in front of my mother. He looked down at her, his perfect blue eyes shining like crystal moons. His voice was like frozen silk.
Megan, would you come down to the basement with me? I need to have a few words with you.
Oh, that's good.
My mother took a step back.
Get away from me. Get away from my family. You're not welcome here anymore.
She turned desperate eyes to my father.
Spence, do something.
My dad raised his hands in a gesture of helplessness. I could see he was terrified.
What a pussy. Fuck him, dude.
Realistically, okay, let's say that this thing is some kind of monster demon. I don't know what happened when Spence was a kid. Maybe the prequel will lean into that, right?
Right.
Maybe like a whole town like shot at him or something and it did nothing. Who knows, right?
Sure.
But I
sure.
would think you would be there just unloading into this thing, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is that even if the action is futile, it's just the act of like, you want these people, especially parents, especially the mom is actually being like, fuck this, I'm not doing this anymore. She's standing up for not only her family, but for, or herself and her family. And now the dad is just like, oh, I don't know. You want him to like go up and be like, yeah, no, get the fuck out of here. And even if it's futile, they did the right thing.
What if
whenever you have this character,
hold on, what if like if someone does that, if the family simultaneously like get out, what if he just kills the family?
that begs here's the thing. That begs the question of, is it worth figuring out, like, is it worth dying over being in a perpetual tormented hell? Like, if
he said it's
like,
only
if
5 years. He said it's 5 years.
It's a long time.
That is a long time,
I mean,
but
like,
is that worth
I
living
understand
for?
is,
you know?
well, that's just the thing though, too. It just depends on what kind of, if this is going down into the trauma that we're getting ready to go into, right? That 5 years could completely destroy a person's entire life, trust with other people. These kind of things shape you entirely as who you are. I'm not advocating for like the death, obviously. I'm just saying that like, it just depends. Like, what kind of life have the mom and dad been living? Right.
This begs an interesting question I haven't really thought of. What level of pain would you allow your family to go through if the alternative was they die? It's hard. That is a heavy question, you know?
Very subjective. I mean, it just depends per person. You would like to think that if it's something that, listen, if like, this is so fucked up. If Tommy Taffy was a Looney Tunes character who's just like, I'm going to break your kid's legs, but they won't die.
Yeah.
And if it was just like this torturous thing, I would probably be like, okay, I'm sorry. And like my kids would probably be like, you let that happen. But I'm like, well, it's better than you being gone forever.
You're alive.
Versus, hey, this thing is going to fundamentally destroy your brain. And like, you'll never be able to trust anyone again. Like, it just depends. I don't know. I really don't know. That's like such a, heavy
it is an
question for sure.
insanely uncomfortable question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Stephanie was watching from the living room, her lip quivering, eyes watering. I suddenly wanted to go comfort her, but I felt glued to my chair.
Come on now, Megan. Just a quick word. Fuck you.
My mother spat. I gasped, heart dropping into my stomach. I never heard my mother swear before, and it scared me stiff. Man, a kid in that situation, that's what scares him. Oh, man. This is what I get for making fun of the dialogue being hammy at the beginning. This is my fault.
Well, you know what's funny is that they really only had that hammy dialogue for two lines.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And then it's immediately just
it was just
nosedive.
cheesy enough because I like this back and forth. Like, I think it's very suspenseful.
Suddenly, Tommy grabbed my mother by the back of the neck, the smile never leaving his face, and yanked her to the basement door.
Spence, stop him! Help me!
My mother screamed, helplessly trying to remove Tommy's iron grip from her. Tommy shot my dad a look that froze him where he stood.
I'm sorry, Megan. We need to do what he says.
He cried.
What a fucking pussy. That's so, ugh.
I'm like depressed right now.
This is, God.
This was like a pound of bricks just thrown at me all at once. Stephanie was now openly crying, hands at her sides, tears running down her face. I felt sick as I watched Tommy open the basement door and drag my mother down into the darkness. The door slammed closed behind them. It was silent for a few minutes, and then the screams began. I had never heard my mother scream before, and the sound of it shattered me. My father ran into the kitchen, scooped me up into his arms, and snatched up Stephanie in his other one. He marched us upstairs into his bedroom and dumped us onto the bed. We sat huddled like that for hours, none of us speaking a word. My mother continued to scream. Finally, long after the sunset, we heard the basement door open.
Mom's sleeping in the basement tonight.
Tommy called out.
Wow. Let me ask you, like, are you as upset with the dad as I am?
Yeah. I think that guy should be dead. Yeah, 100%. I think realistically, let's say Tommy is like a demon or, you know, something adjacent, right? You can't kill it. What you would do if he grabs your wife is you take the kids outside, tell them to run, tell them to go, you know, wherever, something like that.
Yeah, and then you go down there and you help her.
And you burn the house down. You go down there. Like if you can't kill this thing, well, guess what? Good luck coming to a house that doesn't exist, right? Like
the most you have to do is save the children, because even then I think your wife would be like, if we could try to get rid of this thing and it takes us out, at least they have a shot at doing, you know, of living. I think so too. But my heart fell into my stomach when she says, Spence, stop him, help me. and my mother screamed, helplessly trying to remove Tommy's iron grip from her. Tommy shot my dad a look that froze him where he stood. It almost made, I read that, and in my mind's eye, it made me think that he was walking right in front of him. Like they're not across the room.
Yeah, he's standing
right by
next
him.
to him. Yeah, and he just does nothing.
At what point, too, after a thing like that, would you ever be able to trust your spouse again? You wouldn't be able to.
I think she's dead. Or
the dad?
Oh no. The next line talks about the mom. No, I was saying I thought that the mom died there. She's sleeping in the basement tonight, but no, she's not.
I read it like he was just doing something, some kind of torturous act to her, and she's either blacked out or she's on the verge of death. But he's like, oh, she's sleeping in the basement tonight. Because I feel like if he would have killed her, I think he would have just been like, we're gonna have to find you a new mom or something like that.
What happens if you just leave? Right? What happens if you just start driving?
Well, I think the idea is, at least what they've pointed out with this being a generational thing, I don't think it really matters where you go. He's going to show up.
You're sure, but if it's a 5-year gap, why not just I would game it, you stay in public spaces for 5 years if need be, right?
Right.
I don't know, man. Some way other than putting your kids upstairs and making them hear their mom scream,
Yeah. No, I think it once again becomes a subjective thing where obviously I think it's easier, like in a way of reading a story or like watching a movie, it's easier to just be like, just move. But that's, how hard that is. Also, what kind of life is that for your kids too?
But the alternative here is your wife gets brutalized in the basement while your kids listen.
No. That's why I'm saying you should have done something.
Move, be homeless.
Yeah.
Go lay on a public street where there's witnesses or something, right?
Sure. No, yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. I think it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know, he just showed up randomly one day. So maybe from how I'm looking at it as well, I'm wondering if they're just like, oh, we just need to let him do what he wants and he'll leave again for who knows how long.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows?
March 1991. 2 years passed. After that night, my mother never resisted or talked back to Tommy again. When she came out of the basement the following morning, I expected to see her covered in bruises and blood, but I could see no visible signs of violence. I was too young to understand what had happened, why my mother now walked with a limp and would for the rest of her life. She didn't speak to my father for a month, and even then it was just enough to get by. I noticed my father crying a lot during those 2 years. I didn't know what was happening to my family, but I kept my mouth shut and obeyed the rules. Listen to Tommy. Don't talk about Tommy to others.
What do you think happens if you talk to Tommy to others? Do you think it's something where it's like...
Maybe you pass it on.
Yeah, does it pass on, you think?
Could be for sure.
Or if you just find out about it, do you just get punished even more, etc.?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if this is some kind of mimetic
entity,
parasite
or whatever,
yeah, then keeping it to yourself probably is the best move. Maybe that's why you don't go into public with it, right? Like what I said, like going to public, maybe then it infects everyone else,
Well, that's why I'm wondering if there's more than one Tommy.
Because remember, she said, remember what it did to our town.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe it did. Maybe if you see it, it does infect you. Maybe that's why the father won't leave the house.
Multiplies.
Yeah.
Does what, who knows?
Oh, man. Things went calm during those 2 years. Tommy continued to give us life lessons and be a part of our home. No one but my family knew he was living with us. He was our secret, the dark star that hung above our heads. I learned to smile around Tommy, as did my sister. If he thought we were happy, he seemed more relaxed. But that night, my mother challenged him. That changed something. Every couple months, Tommy would assert his authority over my parents. He would test them, stretch the limits of their patience and nerves. Most of the time, my father and mother would humbly submit to whatever mind game he played with them. Most of the time, he would do or say something to Stephanie or myself. It always made me uncomfortable. Sometimes he would have us sit on his lap while he stroked our hair. Sometimes he'd sing strange songs to my sister about love. Sometimes he would make us take a bath together while he watched.
Okay.
I blame you, Hunter. This was
okay. I will take blame.
Yeah, that's what I feel.
I've already jumped off the edge of the cliff. I offer myself.
I always put on a brave face during these times. Stephanie was young still, so she wasn't as bothered as I was. It was uncomfortable, and I would look to my parents for guidance. With pale faces, they nod silently, and I continue in whatever activity we were forced into doing. It was in the early part of 1991 when the next awful thing happened to my family. Tommy pushed the limits once again.
Yay.
I'm sad. I'm upset, and I'm disappointed. This is terrifying, and this podcast is called Creepcast. You know what? Good game there, but...
Well, you know what's crazy is I feel disgusted, but I am still intrigued by the character.
It is.
It is
a fascinating. It is an insanely fascinating monster. I agree. So I rubbed sleep from my eyes and looked at my race car clock on the wall. The glow in the dark hands read 2 a.m. I could hear something in the hallway outside my room. It sounded like someone crying. Where was Tommy? I checked the dark corners of my room to make sure he wasn't there, watching me sleep. When I was assured he wasn't, I pulled the covers away and slipped to the floor. I crept to my door and looked out into the darkness. I could see a figure sitting on the floor by my sister's closed door. A person. I squinted in the black and realized it was my father, with his hands over his face. He was sobbing, his back against the wall.
Dad.
I whispered. My father looked up and immediately shooed me back into my room. I just stood there as my eyes adjusted to the night. My father's face was a mess of blood and bruises.
Go back to bed, Matt. Please.
I took a hesitant step out into the hallway.
Dad, what happened to your face? What's going on? Did Tommy do that?
My father's eyes went wide and he shushed me.
No, of course not. Don't say such things. Tommy is he's here to help us be a better family.
I walked closer to my dad and froze as I passed my sister's door.
Oh, fuck you. This dad is officially my least favorite. Like I'm not even joking. Like I'm actually fucking mad. Like this dad, I fucking hate him.
At least have the balls to kill yourself.
I would say in the way of having the balls to kill yourself, I would say by trying to stop.
Yeah.
That's
what I mean. Like if it's a final resistance or whatever, right? Strap C4 to yourself. Like go in there. Like
well, no, seriously though, like it's unfucking believable. And now he's just sitting outside the door. He's here to help us. Fuck you, dude. Especially like it's the thing. The worst thing that could happen is already happening. So it's just like. It's like I don't know, brainwashed fucking loser.
Yeah, it says the story says that he hears cries coming from his sister's room, and then the boy, whatever his name is, whispers, "Go ahead."
Dad, what's wrong with Steph?
My father wiped a trail of blood from his lips, eyes watering, anguish stretching his features.
Come here, Matt.
So wait, are they trying to insinuate too the blood that he tried to stop him, and that's what happened?
Yeah, I think that's what he's saying. Yeah.
I see.
I crawled into his outstretched arms as something loud banged against the wall from my sister's room.
Oh my God. Okay.
Well, that means that like she got thrown, right? Right? Like he's beating her, right?
Yes, that's what it was. He's picking her up and just throwing her against shelves and shit in the room.
That's when Tommy Taffy started making every room in the house a WWE ring.
Watch out, watch out, watch out.
Watch out, watch out, watch out.
Hey, Stephanie! Just like dive straight into her.
It's funny if you imagine the dad is like Randy Savage.
Oh, yeah. That's the wrong answer, brother.
The mom screaming downstairs is her getting like thrown into the garage door.
Excuse me, Megan. Can I see you in the basement real quick?
They've completely renovated it to be like a fucking giant stadium down there.
The end of the story, the kid goes down there and it's like a rope ring. Like
Vince McMahon is down there and he's like, if you beat Tommy Taffy, you get a contract, kid. We're getting extremely ahead of ourselves.
No, well, this is good, I think.
It's the better. It's
it
a
makes
nice
me feel better.
Yeah.
I would rather the kid be getting like Batista bombed to death than dealing with. Yeah. Okay, so I crawled into his outstretched arms as something loud banged against the wall. I jumped and my father curled me up into his chest. I could feel tears drip onto my head as he fought back misery.
Tommy's in there, isn't he?
Yes, son.
I looked up into his bloody face.
What did you do, Dad?
He tried to smile, but his face wouldn't cooperate.
Hey, He wanted to do something with your sister I didn't like, and I told him no.
As he spoke, I realized I could hear my mother crying from the bedroom. Dad kept his hand under my chin.
We can't say no to Tommy, okay? Remember that.
Yeah, just try to punch it to death. Do something, let it kill you, like any scenario other than how is this dad? How does any self-respecting father still have the ability to walk? Like he hasn't had his spine snapped and he's sitting outside crying.
Yeah,
instead.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what I'm saying is I'm so upset is that he's like sitting outside the door. That's literally where it's happening.
Yeah.
Like the worst imaginable thing that could happen to your daughter is happening in the other room. And you're just standing there like a little bitch being like,
Ooh, I tried to, but God, he hit me a couple times in my face.
Yeah.
it's like, fuck off, you pussy. Unfucking believable. It would only be respectable if if every bone in his body was broken.
Yeah,
and he's like,
I tried.
That's what I meant.
tried.
Like his
You know what I
spine
mean?
was snapped. Yeah, like he's
yeah,
paralyzed.
literally, he's a vegetable now,
yeah,
or whatever.
That would make sense. I'd be like, okay, well, that's a good effort.
yeah.
Well, Dad, you gave it a good college try.
That's pretty good. That's respectable. He's A for effort. My sister screamed from her bedroom, a shrill, piercing cry that took me to my soul. I grabbed my father's arm.
Why is he here?
Why can't he just go away?
My father was silent a moment, then he lowered his mouth to my ear.
Listen to me, Matt. This is very important. When you grow up, do not have children. He follows those with children.
If you knew that, why the fuck would you have kids? Then? I fucking hate this guy.
Wait, hold on.
I hate him.
Hold on. You knew it would
Fuck
come back
them,
specifically if you have children and you had kids. You
What
had
a
two
fucking
kids.
douchebag. To know that too, I'm gonna declare it right now, and I want to put it up for a vote.
I hate this guy.
This is the worst character. This is the worst. This has to be the worst character we've ever had to sit through.
Yeah, as far as like the way it's written, because it's so long, I don't know if this is more cowardice than evil. I would maybe consider the main character's father from Baraska maybe worse because he willingly sold his daughter into it,
True.
But
true.
But here,
I guess it's just that
it's
just
because we have
negligence.
to live with it. It keeps
Well,
coming up.
I would say, okay, well, let me say they're on the
He's a
same
coward.
tier, is what I would say.
Yeah,
They're on the same tier.
I would agree
because
with
the
that,
other guy he's cowardice and he sold in his daughter, and he felt bad about it, but still, fuck that guy from Baraska. But even this guy here he's a coward, but he knew he could have prevented. I feel like it's more evil because I feel like I know he could have prevented it.
Yeah,
beforehand.
that line
Like,
about don't have kids makes it worse.
Yeah, it makes it. I'm fuming.
I could
dude.
see if like at the end of like his story, they thought they killed it or something like that.
Yeah,
There's no redemption this guy can have. I don't think. I don't see a scenario. I mean, even if it does result in the death of your family.
Also, I just want to say, how fucking crazy is this, dude? That your brother is sitting in your dad's arms outside of a room where the worst thing ever is happening, and now he's having this conversation here. Like, hello? I don't know.
I shifted in my father's arms as something was dragged across the floor from the other side of the wall. Maybe the child is just getting beat up.
In my mind, I feel like I have once again the Batista bombing.
Yeah,
the cast iron skills. That's what I'm doing.
The getting hit on the wall and dragged across the floor sounds like being thrown, beat up, stuff like that, right? So yeah. My father grit his teeth, more tears spilling.
We don't know who he is or what he is. He came to our town when we were little boys and girls. Just like you and Stephanie. Your mother and I lived 2 houses down from one another. Tommy infested our street. I don't know how. He was everywhere, always. He'd be at my house, but also across the street. And also at your mother's, all at the same time. I don't know what else he wants. What his purpose is. He just showed up one day. He just showed up and won't go away. God knows my father tried.
Is that how Grandpa died?
I asked. I never met my grandpa. Just knew he had died years before I was born. My father nodded.
Yes, Matt. Tommy had to teach him a lesson. He had to teach the entire street a lesson. And after that,
Why can't you just kill him?
I whispered ever so softly. My dad brought his mouth closer to my ear, his voice barely audible.
we tried. We tried everything. We burned him, shot him, cut him to pieces. But it never worked. He always came back. And And someone had to pay. Someone always has to pay. If we didn't follow his rules, someone had to pay. Tommy was our secret. He was our invisible monster, hidden from the outside world. Deaths were covered up. Abuse was brushed under the rug, but because we knew if anyone said a word, Tommy would make it bad for whoever had to face his punishment.
How does that paragraph make you feel?
I mean, he's immortal. I get it. There's no use or whatever. But I guess it's just the sheer fact of, I still just think like, so people are going to just let this thing happen because the power at be is just invincible. To me, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just not going to be a prisoner to this. And I'm not going to subject that. I also would not have children.
If you can shoot it and it temporarily goes away, because it sounds like, you cut it to pieces, there he is dead. And then a new incarnation of Tommy appears, right?
Yeah, there's like different ones.
And sure, he makes it worse, right? So I think the best scenario is Tommy shows up and you blow his head off and you're like, okay, go, right? Because if you make this public, yes, I guess theoretically it would infect more people, but like if Tommy is a supernatural being, then that means there must be someone out there who knows of him, right? Some ancient religion or something that can dispel him, right? And I think making it super public would cause a greater chance of that to happen. I mean, if nothing else, dude, go to the military, put yourself in like a 24, if it becomes a public event. Like, go get in a situation where you have 24-hour like surveillance, watch something like that, right? Any scenario other than crying in the floor while your daughter's in the next room.
I just think I would rather be dead.
Yeah, I think so too.
I feel like I would just. I do not want to have to live like that. Is not a life. That is it's a prison.
I mean, honestly, like I know people have different definitions of like morality, cause, purpose, stuff like that. But what are you? That's close to human if you just allow that to happen,
Well, yeah. I mean, what kind of actual human experience is that?
Yeah,
It's not.
I mean,
at
that,
point.
yeah, you're a dog. You're just
Literally,
you're an animal that follows orders, sits when told to sit, stuff like that. Yeah,
I would not bring another life into this world, especially if I'm cursed or plagued with this thing. That is a luxury I do not get to have.
Sounds like he knew it would never go away, and yet he had children. What a monster! What a loser!
That's what I'm saying. It's a thing where it's like, oh, well, I loved your mother. You
Shut
guys
up.
don't get to have that luxury.
Yeah.
You don't. You could have someone in a companion who has been through the traumatic experience that you have, right? But to procreate is the
please kill yourself. Yeah, like
literally, actually. It's insane.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that at least emotionally, based on how it's portrayed, this has got to be the worst character. Now, that doesn't mean worst quality wise, because I think this is a very interesting story and written well. I mean, worst. No,
I'm just saying I am upset with this guy.
Yes,
I think like morally bankrupt pieces of shit, and even to the mom's extent too. Like I'm mad at the mom for even allowing that, because now she even as a kid. And like if they knew that together, it's just one of those things where you're like, what the fuck? Even now with the case of her being like, oh, I'm going to stand up to it. You shouldn't have even done it in the first place. Like this should not even be a bridge you guys have to cross.
Yeah, they're both wildly reckless.
Yeah.
I hate the father more just because I feel such frustration for him. But yeah, but you're right. If not the dad, the mom should have been like, no, duh.
But at least the mother has done something heroic.
She has
had
some level of like standing up to him, right?
And now this is the first time technically we've read in the story where the dad is like beaten up a little bit, and he's just like, it's been years, and that's the first time. I don't know.
Man, like what's Tommy's respawn time? Like 8 hours or something? All right, well, I'm in shifts now. I'm sitting at the front door, sniper rifle. Every time he walks up the driveway, I'm stacking bodies right there.
It's kind of like the end of Jeepers Creepers 2. When they know when the monster is going to come back, and he's like, all right, I'm going to be right here waiting for him. Whatever. It's normal. Just don't talk about it. Is how this feels. Yep.
I think so. And I don't like it. I was sitting in my room with the door closed. It was almost dinner time and everyone was downstairs getting ready. I could hear Tommy laughing from the living room. I looked down at the magazine one of my friends at school had given me. It was a Playboy.
Here we
go. Oh, no.
You're a little too young to be reading that, brother.
We had pored over the pages at school, giggling and ogling over the naked women scattered through the magazine. I'd never seen anything like it. It was my first exposure to that world. It made my heart race in ways I enjoyed, and I felt something weird, but pleasurable stirring inside of me. I'd asked my friend if I could borrow the magazine, and he had let me. I adjusted myself on my bed and pored over the nude photos. I couldn't believe women actually let people take pictures of them like this. I don't want to read that line. He felt the thing that you would feel. My heart was racing as I felt hot, my cheeks flush. I don't like where this is going, man. If it gets too explicit, I'll read over it quietly and summarize. I was on the last page when I heard something from the doorway.
What you got there, Matt?
I whipped my head up, jumping, the magazine falling to the floor. Tommy was watching me from the door. I hadn't even heard him open it.
Nothing.
I mumbled, snatching the Playboy up and shoving it under my pillow. Tommy walked over to me.
I didn't hear you come in.
I mumbled, blushing. Tommy reached under my pillow and pulled out the magazine.
It's not nice to lie. I've told you that. Why were you lying to me, Matt?
I swallowed hard, heart thundering against my ribcage.
I'm sorry.
I trailed off miserably as Tommy thumbed through the pages. He glanced down at me.
Do you like this?
I knew I couldn't lie to him again. I nodded, my skin flush, eyes on the floor. Tommy smiled and sat down next to me on the bed. One hand's touching his leg, and Tommy says,
Do these pictures make you feel good?
I didn't look at him as I nodded again. Suddenly, all right, yep, not reading that at all. Nope.
Oh God, the quote. No. Oh God.
Gosh. Oh my gosh.
Oh no. Okay.
Do not go read this. Do not go look this up. Everyone.
No.
As a 50% owner of Creepcast, I am using my veto power of authority to say, for I think the first time, we're not going to read this section. I'm going to quietly read it as I continue to react, and then we'll summarize.
Okay. I just got done reading it, and I want to fucking throw up. Basically, he was going to teach the kid how to have alone time, but he doesn't end up doing it, and he kisses him with tongue in his mouth at the end. That's what it just seems so unnecessary. This is like,
yeah, this is way
You know what
too.
I mean?
This is way too explicit.
yeah, I mean that's bordering on snuff. I mean, like you took a good thing and we went too far. Let's just skip to the next part.
Yeah. So it actually doesn't go as far as it will. There is one part in there that I think is worth noting to what his existence is. His mouth tasted of rotting fruit and decaying meat.
Weird. What a weirdest rotting fruit.
It's almost like on the inside of this plastic shell, he's like a rotten corpse.
Or he's like a reanimated just pile of flesh or something.
Yeah. Like he was some accursed like husk of meat given a shell.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's an interesting character. But yeah, that whole segment is way too graphic. No, I'm not reading that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to say if it's there if you want to do it, but I think for a public, it just is unnecessary.
Yeah, I wouldn't go read. I mean, the thing that you think would happen is implied. It doesn't go that far, but it's described in detail. Yeah, so
to the point where it's just like I don't really know what that gets you.
It's honestly like no exaggeration. It's like porn dialogue, but in a very horrific scenario involving a 10-year-old, mind you. So yeah,
No thanks.
Nope. So July 1994. As the days marched closer and closer towards July, my family developed a silent, optimistic, a desperate plea to make this all stop, to make it all go away. My mother and father made sure there was no reason for another hard lesson. They'd been over backwards for Tommy, begging through clamped teeth that we'd all make it to July without another incident. On July 3rd, we woke up to find Tommy Taffy was gone. 5 years to the day.
Woo!
Woo! He's gone. Yippee! We couldn't believe it. He had simply vanished overnight. We checked the entire house, my mother weeping tears of relieved joy that the nightmare was finally over. Over checking every inch of the house 3 times over, we met in the living room, embracing one another as a family. Tommy had moved on. The sentence was over.
Like you said earlier, does it not almost be even more effective if you just stopped the part where I looked up, or it's just like what you got there, and then it just cuts to that?
As the days march closer and closer towards July, infinitely works better. Lets you imagine what happened. Lets you imagine the terror. Yeah, I think so.
You've completely cheapened everything that you were trying to do there by doing that. And like, it's upsetting and it's gross, but I don't think it's effective.
You went too far to get the shock value moment. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think. I think the story becomes infinitely better if you remove that. You know what I mean? You don't. It's just gratuitous to be.
You don't need to
It goes into
describe it.
snuff. I mean, it's unnecessary.
Yeah, I agree. My father called out of work and we went away for 2 weeks to the beach. During those 2 weeks, I kept expecting to wake up with Tommy standing over me, that perfect smile on his face. But he didn't. It was over. My parents did their best to rebuild our family, fill in the cracks that had been going during those long years, and loved them dearly for it. But some monsters just can't be forgotten. I don't know what Tommy Taffy was or where he came from. I don't think I'll ever know. What was his purpose? Why did he do those awful things to us? I pore over the possible answers until my head splits and I find myself crying. The memory's too much to dig up. Some things are just left dead in the past. But I haven't forgotten what my father told me in the hallway that awful night outside my sister's room. I'm 33 now and have remained unmarried and without children. I can't risk it.
Good man.
I mean, it sucks, but yeah, absolutely. I can't risk that monster coming back into my life. I've never understood why my parents chose to have kids. Thank you. They both have been exposed to Tommy during their childhood, so why have Stephanie and I? Maybe they didn't believe he'd come back, but I believe it, and I'm terrified. Because you see, yesterday my sister gave birth to twins.
Oh no! Oh God. If you just would have removed the snuff part from that, this becomes a top tier one. That's a great ending. That is the ending to this.
I didn't even consider that.
That is so.
That she never heard. She never heard that message in the hallway.
Exactly.
She wouldn't know. She wouldn't know. She'd think it was over.
The dad's so fucking incompetent. Of course he's not going to, hey, in the 5 years, I'm just not going to tell her. Why would you?
Oh,
you fucking
man.
idiot.
And they tried to not bring it up, so they never told her, and then she had kids. Oh, man. What a great ending.
What a great ending.
What a solid ending.
Man, I got to say, especially, it's a great length, too.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
Really easy read. If you get rid of the snuff thing, I say that's a top contender.
It's top 3, I think, without it. With it, I don't know. It drops more to the middle because it just went too far. It took the biggest thing the story had going for it, the nuance around what was happening, and then spelled it out too much. It didn't need that. It cheapened it.
It's like it's just one of those things where it's like, dude, I get it.
Yeah. It's like, oh, really? That's what was happening? I didn't know. Yeah.
I think if you read it the way you said, with just skipping right, I think it flows better. Also, I want to say too, if you read it that way too, like, I don't know what Tommy was or where he came from. I don't think I'll ever know what was his purpose. I think if you do that and you keep it all ambiguous, I think that it makes this entire last preamble hit so much harder.
Oh, as
you know
I pour over possible answers, I find myself crying. Yeah. Too much to pick up.
That's what it was. That's what it was. Because it's like, obviously something traumatic happened, right? I don't think as the reader, I need to have that all spelled out to me. I think that allure of the imagination from reading this is you're opening up so many questions and doors that I think make it more impactful. But that last end part, I don't want to keep harping on it because I know it's like, we get it, it's bad, but what a great fucking ending. Because you see, yesterday my sister gave birth to twins is crazy.
I'm reading the replies right now because there's Reddit comments and someone.
Yeah.
Someone's like, I don't know if I've ever hated something as much as I hate Tommy, and then quotes the part about the abuse to the daughter and says, seriously, screw that guy.
Yeah.
like
No shit.
Really?
It's definitely some 10-year-old who was like,
Who else that was kind of weird when he pinched your cheeks?
Yeah.
What a monster.
Seriously, what a jerk. That guy is a meanie.
Also, I don't know if so this is about 8 years old, this first one, and it's by someone named Elias_Withrow.
Yeah. They link their
very effective
link
monster.
their Facebook at the bottom.
We'll obviously leave that in the description stuff, but I gotta say, for a monster that is personified to be something about what I would say is generational trauma in that way, or especially how trauma like that can repeat itself, I think is extremely effective. I think it's like very, very creepy. It doesn't go too over the board with it, but I like the one little, if you could have gotten that description of the rotting fruit and meat
Put it somewhere else.
in a different way, I think that would have been nice, because I like that it was just like it was a little spice.
Yeah.
If each time you heard something different about him, I think it would personify him too much. I think that like his outer appearance is already so uncanny. I mean, honestly, even too, picturing him as a giant Funko Pop character like fucked me up. Not even gonna lie.
Put it somewhere where like he gets too close to his face and his breath smells like rotting meat or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Otherwise than that, though, at the same time, I guess if there was criticisms about him, I do wish that there was more to his character besides just being this creep, which I think even if you're trying to do something where you're trying to make a monster personified over that kind of over that kind of subject matter, I kind of wish that there was just a bit more with him, because the entire time it was very kind of one notey of like caressing cheeks, like putting fingers through hair. At one point it was just one of those things where I'm like, what exactly is this end goal? Like, what is the purpose of this guy? And I wish that there was maybe something that made a bit of sense in that regard.
I think I'm okay with no purpose per se, because you can imagine it as like a curse maybe that befell people. You could imagine it as like maybe it's some kind of like, maybe it's a demon that just does this to like random victims or something like that.
Sure.
I don't think it needs a purpose per se. I think maybe it needs a finale.
Do you mean by that it just needs better closure than being like, oh, we woke up and he was gone?
More so, there needs to be a final step, I think, after the 5 years. Maybe, even if it's something as simple as like there's a rune carved on the door. I mean, maybe that makes it too expressly old world deity. Maybe like when the 5 of them leave, they all have like a branding. They wake up with a branding on their chest or something. It's something that implies like a finality to it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it makes it seem like Tommy in the last week was like, well, I guess I'll just, wait out my tenure and then I'm on to another house into this.
Like you've been marked. You know, by doing that too, it's something too where if you've been marked, you can never remove the mark. Or like it's permanently on you, which is also kind of another.
Which leads back into the trauma thing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's something that it was forever staining you kind of thing, I think is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there a way to where if you could if it is a curse, right? Is there a way you could break the curse?
See, that would be the
or like a thing of like you have to do some kind of ultimate sacrifice to do it. Like I forgot what show it is, but there's one where it's like you have to cut off your fingers. You have to cut off a finger, and it counts as you paying a debt. So if you don't do it, you have to like endure all this stuff, or you could just cut off one of your fingers, which it's something that isn't. It would be hard to like just be like, I'm going to just cut off my finger because that would suck. But for something like this, could there be something better or something? Where maybe it is castration. Maybe you have to castrate yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know. Something with actual weight where you're like, holy fuck, like that would be hard. Do you think that would add to the story, or do you think that like it just being a 5-year curse where there is no rhyme or reason to it, but you are just a marked one is more horrifying?
I think it being a 5-year curse you can't get out of is a terrifying thing. Again, I just think there needs to be some kind of like final swoop to it. Not that we have to understand it, but that it's something that Tommy understands.
I just picture that his, much like a cartoon character, his teeth would be, it's just like one large chunk, kind of like a old Cartoon Network character or something.
Yeah, most people depict him as a Ken doll, basically.
Oh, interesting.
That's what most depictions I see are.
I wonder if the blonde hair thing has to do anything with like, if that's inspired at all by like Jimmy Savile or whatever, if you remember him at all, but he was like a notorious child predator in England.
Yep.
He was kind of like
I know you're talking
very
about.
Goofy like that. I am honestly glad we read The Third Parent first, because then when we were first starting this, we had his name was Tommy Taffy was the next one. And then that one starts off with, some of you may have read my son's account, The Third Parent. And now it's all from the perspective of the mom. And that's going to be a lot more interesting of a read knowing that.
Oh, okay. All right. So hold on. Oh my gosh. All right. So I found Elias, the author, Elias with a row. I found his Reddit, right? And he has a compilation of all his stories. He did a short story a while back that I remember reading called Feed the Pig, which is like a
Feed the Pig.
Feed the Pig. It's pretty widely regarded. I don't remember all the details of it, but I remember liking it when I was a kid. It's about like a man walking through hell, if I remember right. And it was pretty freaky. I remember. So he did Feed the Pig. So I have read his work before. And it turns out, looking at his subreddit, there are 4 parts to the Tommy Taffy series, with what we just read being part 1 and then part 2 being the prequel that we started on earlier.
Little intermission here. So we are now going into His Name Was Tommy Taffy. This is now the prequel to the third parent, which this is all from the perspective, like you were saying, from the father of the last story, who is the most hated character in Creepcast history. I'm already calling it.
Definitely the most hated. I mean, like, equal level of evil as some mentioned, but not nearly as annoying. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I will say about the first story, great writing from Elias Withrow. Just like I said, just like a tweak about some stuff at the ending. Other than that, just stellar. Very good.
Amazing ending.
Yeah.
The one of the most powerful last couple lines from some of the stuff we've read.
Because I didn't even think about that. I didn't even consider the concept. Around
that didn't even it didn't even cross my mind. All the chaotic stuff happening, that whenever that came back in, it was just like another huge blow to the chest.
Yeah, it's just like a hard pitch straight to the chest.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
So we're now on to the part 2, which is a prequel of the story, effectively called His Name Was Tommy Taffy. So some of you may have read my son's account, The Third Parent, about what happened regarding the monster Tommy Taffy. After reading it, after crying over it, I felt compelled to write this. I'm not here to defend my actions. I'm
Yes,
not
you are.
here to make excuses.
Yes, you are.
I did what I had to so that my family would survive.
No, you didn't.
I knew what Tommy was capable of.
Mm-hmm.
I knew what we'd have to endure.
Fuck you. It's like the first thing I say, after reading all that, I'm like, fuck you. Boo!
Get him off the stage.
So help me God, if he sways me too, I'm going to be so upset.
But I also knew that if we could make it 5 years without pissing off Tommy Taffy, we'd come out of the nightmare alive. How did I know that? Because I'd already lived it. I'd already been exposed to what that thing was capable of. I had seen Tommy's temper. I'd seen what pushed his buttons. I'd already done my 5 years. Like I said, I'm not here to defend myself. What happened to my family is unspeakable, but we are alive. No, instead I'm writing this so you can understand why I did what I did. That's what an explanation is. Why I chose to let Tommy do what he did to my wife and children. After you hear my side, after you read what I went through, then you can judge me. God knows I deserve it.
I can judge you already for your actions, dude.
That struck as those like Facebook posts girls will do that'll be like, only God can judge me, you know? Like
Yeah, it's like, whatever, dude.
Tommy first arrived on my street when I was 7. I was an only child and lived with both my parents in a middle-class neighborhood. It was a mellow slice of the American dream, like a cut of apple pie under a smothering layer of vanilla ice cream.
Fuck you. Also, I want to say, do you think he was more surprised too because our Matt in the original story was 6? So do you think that they were surprised because maybe they were like, he shouldn't be coming for another year if he was 7?
I understand how. So the only way I fully think that Spence knew Tommy Taffy was coming for his kids is if something happens in this story where an adult tells him, oh, he comes every so years, whatever.
Right.
If this was his only interaction, I would almost understand being like, oh, well, I guess that just happened once, right? Like, you don't know it's generational.
I think there's going to be people on the street that are like, oh, well, I feel like the rules are going to be explained to others and it's passed on to him, and that knowledge is what I think is going to happen.
I got to say, this Tommy Taffy is a pretty interesting, like, horror movie creature, right? Like, you mentioned Cheaper Creepers earlier, but it does remind me of that a lot. Like, generations have to prepare for it and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I'm very curious. I mean, we saw in IMDb there is a third parent film. I don't know if it's super indie or what, but I wouldn't mind checking it out.
Yeah. That'd be cool. I'd watch it. The concept has me sold. I think it's a terrifying idea. Like, he has to live.
The visual is really fun too.
Our street was in a secluded residential neighborhood in the far corner of our sprawling development. There were 6 houses in total, and we were a tight-knit bunch, both the parents and children. In the summers, we'd have cookouts, and in the winters, we'd have Christmas parties. It was almost like our block was one big family. Everyone looked out for one another. Everyone was generous and considerate. It was a different time when people trusted one another. But our picture-perfect life shattered when he arrived. I'll never forget it. We begin. July 1969. I had just gone to bed, my 7-year-old mind exploring my imagination, turning thought into dream. The moon was a warm slice of yellow in my window. an expanse of stars winking down at me as I drifted off to sleep.
Imagine being this descriptive and this flavorful with your text, explaining why you let your children and wife get raped by a monster. Hello? What a fucking psychopath.
I know that my wife and daughter were horribly abused by this monster.
Yeah.
My block was like an apple pie, you'd say, almost like the vanilla ice
My
cream.
7-year-old mind exploring my imagination, turning thought into dream. The moon was a warm slice of yellow in my window.
It's like, shut the fuck up, dude. God. I hate him so much.
I could hear the TV in the living room, a comforting reminder that my parents were still awake and the monsters under my bed would stay away tonight. That's when I bolted awake by a knock at the front door downstairs. It was such a sharp contrast to the comforting murmur of the TV that my mind went on full alert as the noise echoed in the house. Sat up in bed, irritated, clutching Growls, my teddy bear. I heard the heavy footsteps of my father walk to the door, probably expecting a neighbor. The familiar creak of the front door was followed by the muted murmur of conversation. I could hear my father's voice speaking, interrupted on occasion by another male voice I didn't recognize. My mother joined the conversation, and I could hear my father getting angry. Okay, so it sounds like here his father does not know who Tommy is, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. And he's having an actual rational response to it. And we do know from the previous story.
No, you can't come in my house. What are you talking about? Yeah,
Yeah, and we know from the previous story that the dad died doing whatever. So I'm hoping that still
his dad
remains
was cool
a
and
hero
awesome.
in this. Yeah, I'm hoping.
Minutes stretched on as the mysterious late night visitor continued to talk with my parents. I slid out of bed and went to my bedroom door, peeking my head out to listen. I still couldn't make out the words, but I could tell my father was getting furious. He started yelling, and I heard him demand that the visitor leave our house or he was calling the police. It got very quiet then, so quiet I could hear my heart beating in my chest. Then I heard my mother begin to cry. It was soft. So soft, but it scared me. The nighttime visitor was saying something to my parents. His voice low, my mother continued to sob. After a moment, my father said something I couldn't make out. Immediately following, I heard something slam into the wall downstairs so hard the pictures in the hallway crashed to the floor. I slapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a scream, heart racing. What was going on? My mother let out a pitiful noise and I could hear her pleading with someone. There was a scramble of feet and then another loud bang against the wall. The intruder was saying something to my parents, his voice oozing with authority. I strained to make out the words, but it came to me in a jumble of soft noise. After another couple minutes of agonizing fear, I heard my father call down for me. My heart was a wild drum beat in my chest, and I bit my lip, hand shaking. Why did he want me? What was happening? My father called again, his voice trembling slightly.
It kind of reads like Tommy is mimicking his dad's voice.
Oh, yeah, I see that. Slowly, I pulled the door to my bedroom open and walked to the edge of the stairs. I realized I was clutching Growls, my teddy bear. I could feel the soft of its fur growing damp. I looked down the stairs to the front door and I froze, eyes going wide. My father was gripping his throat, wincing, tears in his eyes. Something I'd never seen before. My mother had her arms wrapped around herself, moisture staining her cheeks. But that wasn't what captured my attention. It was the stranger standing next to my parents, staring up at me. He was in his early 30s and wore a white t-shirt which read in red font,
Hi!
His hair was blonde and cut short, his two blue eyes pools of glowing brilliance set in a sea of snow. And then I noticed the oddities of this intruder. His skin was impossibly smooth, clean, pink sheen of absolute perfection. His nose wasn't so much a nose as was a nub jutting out of his face. His lips were twisted in a smile and revealing white strips where his teeth should have been.
Hi, Spence.
He called up to me, his voice cheerful.
I'm Tommy Taffy. I'm going to be staying with you for a while.
I clutched Growls to my chest, quivering, begging my parents for guidance. Instead, they cast their eyes to the floor, clearly shaken. I didn't know what was happening, what had been said between them, but I could feel danger in the air, thick and malicious.
Come on down here so I can get a good look at you.
Tommy said, waving me forward. My father's eyes suddenly met mine and I gulped. Even at that age, I could interpret the look he passed on to me. Be careful, son. Cautiously, I walked down the stairs, never letting go of my bear. When I reached the foot of the stairs, my mother reached out for me, but Tommy stepped in front of her, smiling down at me. He squatted down and ruffled my hair, his immaculate skin looking almost polished and waxed at this proximity.
cute little fella, aren't you? Oh, who's that you got?
He asked, gesturing to my bear.
His name's Growls.
Tommy grinned.
Of course he is. I'm going to help your parents for a while, so I'd like the three of us to be friends. Me, you, and Growls. You think that'd be okay?
Again, I looked to my parents for help, confused and shaken. I had no idea what was going on, who this was, why my parents looked so scared. He seemed nice enough, but the way my father rubbed his throat told me otherwise.
Boop, boop.
Tommy chuckled, knocking gently on my head.
Hey, I asked you a question, Spence. What did you do to my daddy?
I whispered, immediately wishing I hadn't. Tommy's mouth remained a frozen smile, but his eyes darkened ever so slightly. My father reached out and grasped my shoulder.
Spence, son, it's okay. I'll talk to you later about it. For now, Tommy's going to, he's going to stay with us.
And that was the start of a 5-year stretch I can never forget. Okay, so here's my theory. The dad sees the guy at the door and is like, what the heck, get out, I'm calling the police, whatever, and says the mom starts crying. I bet the mom experienced Tommy.
Oh, and she had told him about him once before in the past. And I wonder if he's like, oh, I know who this is from what your mom said.
Exactly.
Maybe?
I think that's why it said he shot a look at my mother. Because the dad had a normal reaction.
He slammed the mom and the dad, right? Or did he just slam the dad twice?
I think it's just the dad. I think the dad was fighting, and he just kept picking him up and throwing him into the wall.
Yeah, like by his throat or whatever. Like maybe he tried pushing him, he just grabbed him and threw him into the wall.
Yeah. A few days passed, and soon I learned, through whispered inquiries, that Tommy Taffy had visited everyone on our street. He was in our home, but also in theirs. I learned this from my eventual wife, Megan, who lived across the street from me. She told me that some strange guy was living in their house. After she described him, I deducted it was one and the same, Tommy Taffy. I will say, I know that this story was referenced in the first part, but this is a cool sequel because it honestly reminds me of Aliens in that it goes from like a singular instance to like several.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is something too, where if the character, depending on how one note he is, it could be something to where it's just like, he could be anywhere all the time, generationally. How does this thing just go about through the years?
Yeah. Like it's like a djinn or something, a malicious demon. Yeah. I didn't understand how it was possible, but knew to keep my mouth shut. Tommy had sworn me to secrecy. He swore everyone to secrecy. This was enforced by my parents, who told me in hushed whispers to never tell anyone about Tommy. I could tell everyone feared him. I did too. There was something unsettling about his constant smile, his slightly off features, and the cool, enunciated way he spoke and laughed. I didn't know what he had told my parents to keep them from going to the police, why they were allowing him to live in our home, but it must have been terrible. Yeah, I do wonder what he would have said, right?
Yeah.
Because if some of these people are like a patient zero of sorts, right? Or at least like they never knew about it as kids, then what could Tommy have said to them that made them just like live with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You wouldn't expect every family to act the same too. Like there'd probably be some guy who's like, this is totally unacceptable and get killed right away.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He has to say something to like lure them or silence them, I guess.
We were a hostage in our own house. Of course, Tommy didn't keep us there, but we knew he would be waiting once we came back. At night, Tommy would sit us down and give us life lessons. He would tell us how to be good people, how to love one another. I remember one time during the first week, I looked out my front window across the street into Megan's living room. I saw Tommy there, speaking to her family on the couch. The Tommy in front of my family stopped speaking immediately and stared long and hard at me. Ooh. Then he went to the window and closed the curtains before continuing. Yo, that's cool.
That's creepy.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, like
I love that visual.
It's just you and Tommy, and then when you perceive another Tommy, your Tommy just like big eye stares, like drops it, shuts the window. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, okay, this is a pretty good sequel so far because it's building off of concepts built in the first one without pulling away the punch, right? Without like giving the monster away.
I'm waiting to see what Tommy does and how that differs.
Yeah.
Because if it's the same thing over again, then I'm going to be, I think, disappointed.
I think it'd be fine if it starts as the same thing, but I think the multiple Tommies may lead into something interesting.
Well, that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah. During the evenings, as the fathers on our street came home from work, I'd see them meet briefly in the road, muttering to each other and casting looks over their shoulders. There was a mutual terror shared between them, an unspoken knowledge that they had to keep Tommy's secret, that getting the police involved would only lead to, well, nothing good. I imagined upon arrival that Tommy threatened our family and then showed some sign of physical dominance over the men. I remembered the banging against the walls and the way my father had gripped his throat. But what the hell did he say to them? Why did they allow him to infest our homes? Well, a month later, I found out. They were plotting against Tommy. They were going to kill him. Cool. Based, cool, awesome dads. Yeah, that's more like it. August 1969. Again, I was awoken from slumber. I looked at my Spider-Man clock and saw it was after midnight. I scrubbed sleep from my eyes, grasping in the dark for growls. As I found my bear, I heard banging from downstairs along with several voices. I slipped out of bed and went to my door. The light downstairs were off, but I saw beams of light cutting through the black. Flashlights? I called out for my parents but saw their bedroom door was wide open. I knew they weren't in bed then. More voices from downstairs followed, along with scraping against the hardwood floors. I jumped as a bang shook the night and then the voices faded. Oh, like a gunshot, I imagine?
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. There's people going into the basement, I thought, frightened. Our basement was unfinished, an expanse of empty cement. Why are they going into the basement? I thought. Silently, assuming my parents were down there, I crept to the first floor, clutching growls to my chest. Sure enough, the basement door was open and I saw light reflecting off the dusty floor. I could hear my father's voice, and then the familiar voices of our neighbors. They were speaking to someone. They were angry. My heart froze in my chest as someone laughed from the depths of the cellar. Oh. Making sure to not make a sound, I slunk to the open door and descended the first 2 steps to look out at the scene below me. Tommy was bound to a metal chair in the middle of the room, surrounded by the 6 pairs of parents that lived in our neighborhood. Their backs were to me, but I could see Tommy's flawless face gazing up at them. Megan's father was there, his face a mess of bruises and swollen flesh. His arm was in a sling and it looked like his shoulder slumped like his back was in pain. I sucked in a breath as I realized one of the men was passing my father a pistol. The women stood by their husbands with grim looks on their faces. There was no disagreement among the executioners. Yeah. What a cool line. I love that. I'm just hype about the idea of the women understand, but the men referred to as executioners. There's no disagreement among them.
There's no doubt in their mind that they're all like, this motherfucker has to die.
Yeah, kill it right now. Yeah, that's so cool.
It's time you leave our lives.
One of the men said, looming over Tommy. I recognized him as my friend Luke's father, who lived 2 houses down.
This is your last chance.
Tommy didn't even struggle in his rope bindings, that ever-present smile still on his face. He looked up at them, the overhead light illuminating his sparkling blue eyes.
I don't understand. I'm just trying to help all of you raise your children properly.
I'm not going anywhere.
A look passed between the parents, and then my father put the gun to Tommy's head.
You're not helping anyone. You're a monster. You can't come into our homes and threaten our children, threaten our lives. That's not how this works. All those threats you whispered to us while we were caught off guard. We'll look at you now.
My father spat on him.
Pathetic. And now you'll get yours.
My father shot him in the head. What a G.
Yeah!
What a guy. Just bam, executing him. Grandpa. I love him. He's cool. The report was deafening and I almost screamed, slamming my head over my mouth at the last second. Tommy's head whipped back as the smell of gun smoke spiked the air. It was silent for a moment, and then... In horror, I watched as Tommy slowly raised his head to stare back up at my father.
What the hell?
One of the women breathed, her voice shaking. There was no blood, no shatter of bone, nothing. Just a dark circle in Tommy's forehead where the bullet had passed.
What the fuck are you?
Someone whispered. Tommy's eyes spun to the man who had spoken.
I'm Tommy Taffy, and I'm not going
Anywhere.
My mother suddenly pointed the corner of the room, her hand trembling.
Gas. Get the gas.
Megan's mother went to the far corner of the room and picked up a small red can. I could hear the slosh of gasoline and I smelled it in the air. My father grabbed the can from her hand, his eyes wide and never leaving Tommy. Without a word, he upended it over the bound man, soaking him. Tommy kept smiling. Another father passed my dad a box of matches. My father struck one, his hand hovering in the air.
Go back to hell. Leave us all alone.
Yeah, I don't care if it's over the top. I love the dialogue of the grandpa.
Me too.
That's
I like
awesome.
it.
Go
I
back
like
to
it.
hell. That's awesome. Tommy grinned wider.
Hell is gonna seem like a fantasy when I come back for you.
That's a sick rebuttal. I'd be like,
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry,
When-
Tommy.
the way he phrases it too, when I come back.
yeah, like it's
oh,
like,
man.
yeah, I'm not fuck, yeah.
My father dropped the match and Tommy burst into flame. He didn't scream, he didn't thrash, he simply burned. As his face began to melt, his eyes shifted, and suddenly he saw me. Woo, man.
So you're just picturing his like eyes and his like wax face just kind of
Yep,
like glancing over
melting.
and seeing the kid.
Yep. He's like dissolving. And the laugh, like the laugh directed at him is like the kid shouldn't have seen this, right? Now he's
Yeah.
made a mistake. Heart exploded in my throat. I fled back to my room, tears streaming down my face. From the safety of my bed, I eventually heard the neighbors leaving, relief in their voices. 2 weeks later, Tommy came back.
Oh shit.
So, man, okay, for one, I love this prequel. This is great. This is a great setup. I love the direction. I love the descriptions, all that stuff.
Dialogue is sick.
Dialogue's sick. It's fun. It's cool. It honestly does feel like Aliens in the way so far it goes from like, the horror to action almost, but while still keeping a horrific tone. I really like it.
I like how Tommy is, I don't know, like, and he's like, this is going to sound weird, I guess. He's a lot more manifested in this one. Like, I like, he's a lot more tangible.
Yeah.
They're doing more with him. He isn't just like this omnipotent spirit. Like, he is, but they are interacting with him in a more fun way. I think.
Yeah. You can touch him more so.
Yeah.
Also, 2 weeks later, that is a crazy long respawn time. You can just kill him every 2 weeks. I
Yeah.
feel.
Well, let's see. I'm curious to see
Yeah.
what happens.
September 1969. We were eating supper, a sense of normalcy returning to our home. My parents never told me they had murdered Tommy, instead opting to inform me that his visit was over and he went back home. I still caught whiffs of gasoline about our house, but kept my mouth shut. I was just happy my family was okay. The sun was setting and the dying orange light filtered in through the living room window, stretching out across the floor to cover the dinner table. My mother and father sat at opposite ends of the table, chatting about their days. I could tell they were still shaken, but I admired the way they were trying to return their lives to what it had been before Tommy showed up. Also, that's so cool. The idea of like a husband and wife are like, yeah, we burnt this guy to death in our basement. Anyway, how was your day? How was work? Like,
Well, they're just strong parents too.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the thing is like they understand what's best for their child. Like
Yeah,
if they told
yeah.
him, what good does it do to like
it's not going to help. Yeah,
burden him
of
with
course,
that? You know
of
what I mean?
course. Yeah, they're cool. I love the grandparents. As I shoveled mashed potatoes into my mouth, the front door exploded open. I spun around, jumping as the wood splintered and the hinges creaked. I dropped my fork, eyes growing wide. It was Tommy, and he looked furious. Ooh, what does that look like? What does he furious look like,
Yeah, I almost think that it's just like no smile. I wonder if he is
Yeah.
smiling still. I don't know.
Go ahead.
I almost picture Tommy's mouth can actually not physically close in a weird way.
Yeah, like it's always a half open smile. I agree.
Yeah, like he's like an action figure. There's no like he just is like I don't know.
Yeah. My parents' mouths dropped in unison, but before they could speak, Tommy marched towards us with alarming speed and upended the kitchen table. Dishes filled with food shattered to the floor. My father half rose, fear paralyzing him. Without a word, Tommy grabbed my father by the neck and dragged him to the wall where he plowed his face through the sheetrock. My mother screamed and ran to aid my dad, but Tommy spun on her and punched her in the teeth, sending her crashing to the floor. Feeling my bladder go, panic clawing at my throat, I watched as Tommy pulled my father's bloody head from the wall. Sputtering, dazed, my father tried to release himself from Tommy's iron grip, but it did no good. His eyes dark and his mouth clamped in a snarl, Tommy clamped a hand over my father's throat and dragged him into the living room. Without stopping, he threw him through the window and out into the front yard. I was a mess of tears and terror, snot bubbling from my nose as Tommy turned back to my mother and I. Now, he was smiling. He went to my stunned mother and hauled her up.
You're going to need this. You're going to need to see this.
He said darkly, his lips curled in a grin. He looked at me and jerked his head towards the door.
Come on, Spence. You too.
He pulled my mother to the front door and pushed her outside. I hadn't moved, my face frozen in a silent scream. Tommy looked over his shoulder and winked at me.
Don't make me ask again, sport. Oh, and bring that broom behind you.
Pulled off my chair by fear, I got up and dutifully grabbed the kitchen broom and walked it to Tommy, my pants reeking of urine. Tommy put a hand on my shoulder and guided me outside to stand by our mailbox. I saw my father rolling in the grass, a mess of blood and glass, my mother kneeling before him, weeping. Our neighbors were coming out of their houses, eyes wide, shocked looks of horror on their face as they saw Tommy.
Gather round.
He yelled, motioning for them to come closer.
Look at what you've done.
I saw Megan at her doorstep across the street, face a pale sheet of snow. She looked at me and I saw her begin to cry, burying her face in her hands. Shocked into obedience, our neighbors came and stood around our tiny front lawn by the street, all eyes on my father and mother.
This is your fault,
Tommy said, meeting every one of their terrified faces. He suddenly snatched the broom from my hands. In one quick motion, he snapped the head off, tossed the duster aside, and advanced on my father, gripping the splintered pole. My mother screamed and covered her bleeding husband with her body, but Tommy booted her in the face, wrenching my heart in the process.
Up you go.
Tommy growled, pulling my father up by the hair onto his knees. Glass jutting from his face, my father looked up at Tommy, agony burning in his eyes.
Don't worry.
I'll take good care of your son.
He raised the broken broom over his head like a spear and slammed it into my father's mouth, down his throat until it erupted from his stomach and plunged into the earth. Blood shot like a geyser out of my father and splattered Tommy's perfect features. My mother howled, her bloodshot eyes rattling in their sockets as my father gasped and then died, his lips wrapping around the broom handle jutting from his mouth. The neighbors watching were paralyzed, a few of the women crying out at the sudden display of brutal violence. The men's faces were pale and shocked into silence, Megan's father leaning over and emptying his stomach onto the road. Blood dripping from his face, Tommy turned to face them, eyes alight.
I want you to think about this moment the next time you want to have a bonfire. Do I make myself crystal clear?
All eyes were trained to the impaled figure of my father, pinned to the earth.
I said, do I make myself clear?
Tommy repeated, the smile dropping from his face. Everyone slowly nodded, every eye wet with tears and wide with horror. Tommy threw a thumb over his shoulder.
Now get rid of him. I need to put his son to bed.
I took a step back, tears flowing freely from my eyes, shaken to the core, unable to stop staring at my dead father. My world swam and rocked, my vision a streaking blur of color. I felt like I was going to throw up, pass out, scream until I couldn't breathe anymore. Tommy was suddenly looming over me, sweeping me up in his arms. He pressed my shocked face into his shoulder and stroked my hair. As we went into the house and up to my bedroom, I heard a rumble from Tommy's chest. Yo.
Damn.
What a crazy scene.
Yeah.
A front yard execution with the pole. Next time you want to have a bonfire, like, man. Woo.
Good God.
What was that? What's that part about there was a rumble in Tommy's chest?
Well, I'm just wondering if it's supposed to be like his laugh is coming. Like, I'm wondering if it's supposed to be something kind of uncanny. Like, it's not coming out of his mouth. It's almost like it's this thing inside of him.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Or it could just be that his ears to his chest and just like the vibrato from his, like he could just hear him giggling. Like he didn't see it. He just heard him laughing.
Man, Tommy is a terrifying villain. It reminds me of like at its peak, like the way the boys did Homelander. And like, you know, like he can just kill whoever he wants and no one can do anything about it. Or like, again, at its peak, Negan during The Walking Dead. Like you have these characters who can do whatever they want whenever they want and everyone just has to stand there, you know?
Yeah.
Which I think makes incredibly imposing villains. It's very scary.
Yeah. It's the false sense of security with the fake facade of happiness.
Yeah.
And then just immediately you're like, hey, but don't forget. And then they always like they peek. You're able to peek behind the curtain a bit every once in a while, and it's like, hey, by the way, I'm a psychopath.
What's that part? Do I make myself clear? You know, like that whole thing.
Do I make myself crystal clear? It's like so demeaning.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you must not have heard me the first time. Allow me to retort, and like skewers his dad. You know?
Oh wow. Also here too, the next one is in June 1973, so this is a 4-year time jump here.
How do I describe the following 3.5 years? Words can't make you understand what life was like for my mother and I. My father's murder was covered up by the neighborhood, and my mother, despite the crippling pain it must have brought her. When the police eventually came to investigate on request from his job, the story had already been carefully collaborated by the families. They told the police that my father had been cheating on my mother, and she had found out and then kicked him out. Lies about arguments heard were told, along with a few scenarios where the neighbors, quote, saw my father sneaking out late at night. Man, that's sad.
Yeah, that's horrible. Well, that's also what I was saying. Do you think Tommy had anything to do with that fabrication of that story? This is what you're going to do.
No, because it's the most believable, I think, for a group of people to come up with. Because if you say, it was some kind of murder, the police are going to investigate. They're going to keep looking. You need them out of the houses. Sure. The scenario of a wife saying he was cheating on me and everyone else saying, yeah, we saw signs of it. That makes sense of like, okay, I guess he just ran off somewhere. It was also the 1970s, so it was more feasible to do something like that.
Yeah, they're going to hear that and they're just going to be like, okay.
Yeah,
that's
all right,
pretty much.
Sounds good. He's left. Ditch town. It was enough to get the police off our street. They saw the pain in my mother's eyes, but misinterpreted the source. Everyone was petrified of Tommy Taffy, the lies told in order to assure safety of themselves and their families. An example had been given, a lesson learned. Listen to Tommy Taffy. Do what he wants. Pray that one day he'd go away and leave our broken community. My father wasn't the only one who had been punished. I noticed a couple of the neighbors sporting broken limbs or bruised faces. I can't even imagine the lies they told the outside world to cover up the truth. Tommy was a haunting nightmare in our lives, and we could find no way to get rid of him. The nightly lessons resumed, just my mother and I now, sitting on the couch listening to our captor explain how to be good people. I was 10 then, and it made me sick, age slowly clarifying just how dismal our situation was. But I kept my mouth shut. I kept it shut for my mother. The memory of my father's execution burned bright in my skull every day. The years that followed my father's death marked a change in Tommy's habits. He now slept with my mother, every night leading her to bed after I was tucked in and told one last lesson about life. I would lay awake for hours listening to her cry from her room. Man. Dad's dead now, so I'm going to sleep with your mom.
Yeah.
Gosh. Sometimes it'd be for a few moments, other times hours. He didn't always stay with her through the night, though. I remember times I'd wake up and he'd be standing in the dark corner of my room, watching me sleep. His eyes like shining oceans. Other times he'd be staring at me through the crack in my door. He'd stand there for hours, just watching. Sometimes I'd wake up and to him sliding into bed with me, always placing a cool hand on my thigh. Heart thundering, fear ripping apart my insides, I'd always turn away from him, breaking out in cold sweats. I still had growls, a constant source of childlike comfort. I'd hug him to my chest, tears running down my face until either the sun came up or exhaustion shut my brain down. We endured this silently, begging for it to end. Okay, that's so much more effective than how it was in part 1.
The visual, too, of him just like standing at peak, like smiling, looking in, standing there for hours at a cracked door is just such a haunting visual.
Yeah, I think that works so much better. He's watching in, and then just the mention that he would crawl into bed with him and touch him on the leg. That is way more menacing than like the.
Hey, don't get me wrong, it's still disgusting.
Yeah,
but it's done in a way where it's palatable.
Yeah, it's palatable, and honestly, it's more menacing, right?
Yes,
than just like I said, the scenario played out in the first one, which honestly I think shows improvement on the writer. Right.
I think it's probably criticism as well, or people being like, this was, so I think, which we don't, the story is not over. I don't want to jump the gun, I guess.
Oh my gosh. I am looking down at the next paragraph and I was so wrong.
Okay.
We have another paragraph we're about to skip. All right. So we'll start reading it and then we'll do what we did last time. Okay. July 1974. I was 11. It was the 5th year to the day since Tommy had entered our lives. I sat in the living room reading a book while my mother prepared supper for us. She was pale and gaunt, the long years wearing her to the bone. Her eyes were lifeless these days and had sunk into her sockets, her cheekbones pronounced, skin thinly stretching over them. Growls lay on my chest as I reclined, trying to focus on my book. Tommy was sitting in the chair across from me, watching. I turned a page and jumped as Tommy spoke.
You really love that thing, don't you?
I turned to Tommy.
My book?
Tommy shook his head, smiling.
No, son. That bear.
I looked at growls on my chest and shrugged uncomfortably.
I guess so.
Tommy leaned forward, lacing his fingers together.
Put your book down, Spence.
Licking my suddenly dry lips, I obeyed. I noticed my mother was watching from the kitchen, looking alarmed.
Do you know what love means?
Tommy asked, filled with growls, eyes downcast.
It means you care for someone very much.
Tommy shook his head.
No. Good try.
He suddenly came and sat next to me, placing a hand on my leg, caressing it. Yeah, go ahead. Read this next quote.
No. I just read it. Oh my God.
I know, right? He says something explicit, then says his mom dropped something in the kitchen.
And then Tommy basically points and says, do you want to do that explicit thing to your bear? And then basically he says and then the narrator's like, he heard about people doing that thing at school, but doesn't know what it is.
And it says, I suddenly jerked my head away and threw growls across the room, openly sobbing now.
I don't love him. I hate him.
I covered my face, ashamed, hands shaking. I pulled myself into a ball and lay there, sobbing. I felt Tommy get up next to me and turn to my mother.
It sounds like he's learned his last lesson. I'd be proud of him if I were you. He's a man now.
I looked up at him through tear-soaked eyes. His eyes sparkled.
It took 5 years.
He suddenly leaned down and cupped his mouth over my ear. His voice was cold glass, his breath hot like fire.
Your little ones will get 5 years as well, Spence.
And with that, he looked at my mother one last time and then walked out the door. My mother rushed to me and took me in her arms, comforting me as I cried. Tommy never returned to our home. Okay, yep, Father Spence has no excuse. Absolutely zero. Absolutely
If that's the case, though, too, then if it's his last day, right, it has been 5 years. It took 5 years for him to learn that lesson, is what it said. So then it said, your little ones will get 5 years as well. What lesson did he learn, you think?
About he doesn't actually love something if he doesn't have sexual interactions with it, is the implication.
Do you think that's what the author is wanting to say too, or is there something else there? I'm trying to.
No, I don't think the author's saying that. I think he's what he was doing is the same thing he did with the son in the first story. Tommy is making him experience some perverted sexual thing for the first time in his life. Because the kid's 11. It's the age when, a young boy starts to feel those emotions. So Tommy forces the kid into that.
Okay.
Like the lesson, quote unquote, is, puberty, birds and the bees, stuff like that.
Right.
He's doing that in a very perverted, messed up way. And he's like, okay, well, yep, 5 years is up. Bye.
Yeah.
But having Tommy directly say your little ones will get 5 years as well, and then you have kids.
Well, I mean, it's fucked up. I mean, the thing too is what sucks about this is his dad went through that horrible public death only for his kid to be like, I think I too will have children.
Yeah, what a loser.
The thing here, but he says it took 5 years for him to say that, right? Mm-hmm. So Tommy says his eyes sparkled. It took 5 years. He suddenly leaned down and cupped his mouth over my ear. Your little ones will get 5 years as well. It almost seems like if it would have taken him longer, it would have gotten longer.
Oh, I think you're right. You might be right. Yeah. Maybe that's how it works. Maybe it's not a set 5 years. It's just dependent on person to person.
Probably.
Yeah, you could be right. Time passed and I grew up. I grew up always expecting Tommy to show up again, come barging through our front door, but he never did. The years faded and some of the horror and pain began to fade as well. We were never the same, though. How could we be? My mother was a shell of the woman she used to be. The mental torture she had undergone had broken something inside of her she never regained. But God, she loved me and tried to heal the nightmares of those 5 years. A full year passed before my mother dared ask Megan's mom if Tommy was gone from their home as well. He was. The neighborhood was free, impossibly, unbelievably free from the monster that terrorized us for 5 awful years. I never understood what Tommy's final words were to me, what they meant, until it was too late. When I turned 25, I married Megan. A year later, we were expecting. You've heard the rest from my poor son. God forgive me for having children. God forgive me. Yeah, duh, idiot.
Well, what I don't understand with that too is if you have something that traumatic, I feel like, especially with something, we'd have to hear the perspective of Megan as well. Of like, did something similar happen to her as well? Because if it's like, if the exact same thing happened to Megan as well, I just feel like you would just be like, I don't feel comfortable having children or having that go through them if they both had that thing happen. But him directly saying that, I feel like, especially at somebody at that pivotal of an age, I think would do irreversible mental damage to you, to where I feel like you would be disgusted with the idea of having children, is what I would think.
You would think. One would hope.
You would think. You would hope. Yeah. Here's the thing though, too. I think the overly sexually explicit graphic stuff, I think, is the only thing holding this thing back from being, it's the only thing holding it back from being something crazy. I think that also you could have a horrifying monster, and the whole idea is like, I'm going to help you raise your children, and you could do other things that basically also, if you did that in a way where it was just like, oh, I'm here to just help you be that other parent, there's something very uncanny about you yourself cannot trust your own parents. You yourself have no support system in that way, no guidance. And then now he is completely corrupting the idea of what that is. I think that within itself is a pretty, like, I really enjoyed the parents being like, this is fucking stupid. We need to kill this guy. And him coming out and publicly being like, by the way, I'm going to do this regardless if you like, regardless of not.
Yeah, here's the public execution if you feel otherwise.
I think that there's just a lot. I think it would make him less one note as well with his approach to stuff, because they really gloss over the thing about him being like, this is how he makes little meetings of how you can be how you're supposed to be a good person. I think that should have been explored a little more. I wanted to hear more about these weird meetings and stuff, and like instilling crazy shit. Right? If you're emotionally and mentally manipulated as a child, how does it affect you as you're older? You know what I mean? They just like, there's irreversible damage that happens. So I think like having him do certain things like, oh, you have to go over to your neighbor's house and fucking like, I don't know, like, I guess not steal something. There's not a lot of weight to that, but I guess just like teaching them all the wrong things, and then like, even though the people know it's wrong, having to do it, having to make all these hard decisions, versus him just being this parasite who's just like, oh, I'm just going to do this one thing that's horrible. Feels a bit one note. And it's the only like real thing where I'm like, it's like the one thing that's keeping it from being like this great character and creature.
I'm okay even if it's like some level of implied sexual stuff, like what we talked about with the first one. If it just ended at what you got there, you know? Like, that's fine. I think that can be useful. It can be menacing, but the level of gratuity, I think, doesn't serve the story. Because it's like he goes from like this unspeakable, unknowable beast that like just watches you and stuff to like kind of a pervert, you know, which like diminishes it a bit.
That's what I mean is like, for the story's sake of it, as if like your artistic choice is like, yeah, this is one of the things that it's like a realistic thing, a realistic, horrible thing that happens to people, and it's unnerving and it's like breaks you. I get that. But for it to be the only one thing, I'm just like, I wish that you had something more to give besides that, because now it just feels like, oh, he's just a perverted, like, I don't know, snuff, like a snuff monster kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. I think it goes hard. I like it. Again, it has a few issues, but I think it's still, all in all, like, that's a really good story. I enjoy it. I like the monster. The hell out of it. Yeah, that was fun. That was a lot of fun.
I enjoyed it. I think I'm only upset just because of the idea of like, it could have been, in my eyes, something so awesome. And it is good. I just am like, man, this is like right on the cusp of being something like Pen Pal level of creepy and weird and just strange, uncanny, and like uncanny in a way too, where I'm like, this is what the Jeff the Killer thing was supposed to be. It's it has all these elements of like, this perfectly encapsulates all of like the weird things of like, you know, the realistic eyes, you know, like the body and stuff. It's not the most original thing, but it like does everything right in building those things up.
I think it goes hard. I like it.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think too, the dad, I think it's my least favorite character. I think,
I agree. Yeah. Not only the selfishness and negligence to have children, but like we said, don't like die. Go out like your dad did, like a man, if you're going to be so selfish. Yeah.
You were given a gift from your father to, you know, for him to be like, I'm going to not, I mean, basically the gift of life, right? Mm-hmm. And then to survive on, and then you do that by just giving the curse that you have onto someone else who's innocent is just so selfish.
Yeah, you all should live in the middle of the street, take rotations of men with flamethrowers at night, you know. That's how you live now.
Tommy Taffy, there you go. That is the part 1 here. I'm curious to see the comments here if we get a lot of positive feedback. You know, with something like this, I'd be curious to see what the next 2 parts are. But at the same time, there's also a lot of other stories out there too. It's kind of the thing where it's like Baraska part 5. People want us to go back and do that, but to me, that story is just done. Like I don't want any additional.
Maybe one day. I've heard people say the part 5 is really good, so maybe potentially. But I will say I would really like to read the other half of the Tommy Taffy story. Sounds pretty good.
Okay, well, if anything, if we're stoked on it, we'll see what people say as well. I mean, maybe we can just keep rolling next time.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good. I'd be down to read it. I enjoyed it for sure. And also, again, check out the author of it, who Elias Witherow, who it turns out has a lot of books published too. He has one called Gore Moon. He has one called Memories of Monsters. He has some pretty cool looking stuff. So check that guy out. He also has a print copy, it seems, of the Tommy Taffy story.
Oh, and I wanted to also shout out Neon Tempo, the author of the Left Right game, had a book just published as well. We put the link on our Twitter if you ever want to check that out.
Sick. Cool.
He has a new book out as well, so be sure to go check that out there. We'll probably leave a link as well in the description here. But if you enjoyed the Left Right game, maybe check out his new novel. A nice novel. All in all, also, once again, just to reiterate, if you're watching this on YouTube and you ever want to listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please do so. It helps us out a lot on the podcast chain of events and things like that. And all in all, post memes. We've been posting a lot of fan art at the end of the videos. We've been seeing it on our Reddit and our Twitter. So just tag us or do whatever. We love to see it. We appreciate the community so much. You guys fucking rule. And yeah, until next time, stay spooked, you creeps.
There it is. Stay spooked, you creeps. That's great. That's fantastic. And I'm going to say something normal. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate it.